Welcome to the final episode of a closer look at suicide prevention. I recently sat down with Stephen Hills and Cottrell Lewis, both peer support specialists with Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care. They have both agreed to share their journey through a very difficult time in their lives, a time when they attempted suicide. This conversation was not only about the challenges they faced, but also the strength it took to come through and the lessons they've learned along the way. Stephen and Cottrell, I want to thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your experience. So, can you share with me what led up to your suicide attempts?
Well, with me, it was just a culmination. I was using, and I had done so much, and I had just a lot of trauma, a lot of things that had happened as a result of the situations I had put myself in because of my drug use. And it was so much. I mean, it wasn't one thing, it was just a whole lot of things, because it had progressed to the point where I couldn't pay my bills, I wasn't being responsible, I wasn't going to work. You know, I had my family, I cut myself off from my family, and all I was doing was just using. And it got to the point where I felt like there was no way out, you know.
How about you, Stephen?
Yeah, like with Cottrell, it wasn't like one thing. I'd had depression ever since middle school, but in the last few years before my suicide attempt, it had gotten a lot worse. And it was getting to the point where I could no longer do projects at work. I could no longer make myself start things. I could barely get out of bed. And I felt like I was just a burden to everyone around me and my entire family. I kind of felt like I was, one of those music boxes that you wind up. I kind of felt like I was winding down and getting out of tune and just couldn't function anymore and was just a burden to everybody.
What were some of the emotions that you were experiencing during this time?
I know for me, it was just, just despair, hopeless, like like I was a failure. I was just feeling like I couldn't get out of this. I was in this hole, and it was just hopeless. It was no way out. I felt everyone was going to hate me. I felt like I was weak and was going to be a burden to everybody, because I'd already been asking for money from people, so I've already did all that. So primarily, I think just hopelessness and despair, just overwhelmed. Just no way out of this.
I know for me, it was a lot of hopelessness. I really felt like there was no way out of the situation that I was in. And with that came a lot of shame because I felt like I should be better and that I was somehow failing because I wasn't better. I really felt like I was letting everyone down, and I felt like at that point I was feeling like people secretly hated me. I had a lot of distorted thinking and feelings, and just again that everyone would be better off with me gone.
So was there a specific event or moment where you felt like you just couldn't go on that may have led up to that attempt?
Yes, for me it was like I said, when it got to the point where all my bills were just due. And one thing was my landlord said, hey, the rent has to be paid. You got Friday, or you're going to be evicted. That was just it, because I always been a responsible person. And, that was the event I think that just did it, because I couldn't make the rent. I couldn't make any of the bills. And that was like, okay, it felt like the clock was ticking down to Friday. And the closer it got to it, the more anxious and the more, just the sense of what am I going to do? Who can I tell? I can't tell anyone. I felt that I had let so many people down, and that, who are you going to tell? I felt that shame that Steve was talking about, and just I let everybody down, and there's no way out of it.
I know for me, and it sounds like a small thing, but it was a small thing on the back of everything else. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. I had felt myself just increasingly unable to do things, and I had a big project deadline, and I knew I hadn't even started on it because I wasn't even able to, and I knew that that deadline was coming closer, and it was actually at that date, that was the day I was going to take my own life, the night before. Because I knew at that point I had been trying to hide what I was feeling, and I knew I couldn't do that anymore. And so we got to that date, and it was a snow day at work. I couldn't go in, so I ended up playing with my son, but then the date came to go back to work, and that was the date that I attempted.
So, what did you hope would happen as a result if you had gone through with it, or I shouldn't say gone through with it, but if you had succeeded?
I hope that everything would be better for my family. That was really what I was thinking. I felt like I was such a drag on them, and that that I was holding them back. That I knew that they would grieve. I didn't have any illusions that they wouldn't do that, but I thought, well, they'll grieve and move on, and then everything will be better.
You know, I think for me, it was just wanting the pain to stop.
Yeah.
And that's what I was hoping would happen. I wouldn't hurt anymore. And I was just suffering in silence. You know, no one knew. So I was thinking, okay, it'll be over. I'll be out of pain. And I was like Steve thinking, okay, they'll grieve, but they'll get over it, and they won't even miss me because I'm just such a failure at, you know, at all of this. And I just want to be out.
So, I guess my question, I think you may have already answered it, is had you reached out to someone to talk about how you were feeling prior? And if not, why not? Is it because I know you said you were ashamed, or?
Yeah. I felt I really didn't reach out. I think looking back, I had made a couple of really half-hearted attempts to do so, hoping that someone would pick up on it. And I don't know, there's something about depression sometimes that it just locks you up inside yourself. But in a large way, I didn't really feel like I could reach out to anyone, one, because of the shame of that, and you know, also just because of the judgment that I put on myself, but also that I was expecting to receive from others. If I had told anybody, that I would be judged for that, and
The stigma.
the stigma for that. And also my only idea of the mental health system, which isn't true, and I know that now working in the mental health system, my only idea of the mental health system was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I knew I didn't want to go to an institution and be there and basically not have any kind of real existence there. But a lot of it was that shame and that stigma that was there.
How about you, Cottrell?
Yeah, no, I didn't reach out. I didn't even know anything about the resources that were available. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to check out. I just felt like I was a loser, and that everybody would be better off without me. I felt there was no way out of my situation. No one. I had been responsible up until that point, and I held myself to such a high standard. I just felt like the shame, and you know, how can I explain? You know, you had a good job, you're working, you know, you weren't strong enough to not let drugs consume your life. You know, that's what I was thinking all the way up to the point, like you're just weak. You know, so I never reached out or told anyone. The people I did tell were just people who I was using with, and they were like, I didn't tell them I was going to attempt suicide, but I was telling them how I was feeling, the hopelessness and despair, and how I was in this hole and I couldn't get out. And they was like, okay, here, have another drink, or have some more of this, and it never worked.
Looking back, how do you feel about the attempt now? In regard to, because you both work in the field, and help others who are going through similar things. What do you wish you knew then that you know now?
You know, I wish that I had known how much help was out there, and how many people are actually out there that don't judge and that understand and that are there to help. Actually, when I was in a crisis stabilization unit after I was getting near a second suicide attempt, a group came in and was talking about how they used their lived experience with their own mental illness to help others. And it was like a paradigm shift for me as I really realized that there were people out there who had been through it and were in recovery and were using other people to help. I'm so glad that I wasn't successful in completing suicide. But at the same time, I totally understand where those feelings come from, because when you're in that place, all you feel is the pain, and your vision becomes a tunnel vision, and it's really hard to see the way out. And I wish I had known about those people that could help me find a way out.
How about you?
Yes, me too. I wish I would have known about some of the resources, and just if I could have realized that my family was there the whole time, that they would have been loving and supportive, and that there were places that I could go and talk, and there were people who knew what I was going through. You know, there were groups and there were resources. So if I would have just known, that would have been a game changer. You know, again, I'm just happy that I wasn't successful with it.
Right, absolutely.
And it absolutely led to my desire to help other people. And I'm able to make that connection when I hear people saying, hey, I attempted, or, you know, this is what I'm thinking. Oh, I immediately can empathize and I can feel what they're going through because I've tried it myself, you know, so I can share that with them. But yeah, just having the knowledge of what was out there would have been good, you know. And then opening up and being willing to let my family in, I think would have been the most thing, because they would have been there like, okay, no. Not necessary.
You just didn't think that at the time.
No, like Steve was saying, you're locked and loaded into this
right.
mode of thinking. I know my drug use. That's where I was. The drug was speaking to me in my own voice, telling me this is the only way out. No one's going to understand. You're weak. You're stupid. You're just a failure at everything. And these are what was playing in my head, and it was louder than any reasoning that I could even. The reasoning and thinking part of my brain, like it shut off. And the only thing it was, okay, you need to do this because, and it just kept pushing. The thoughts just kept pushing and pushing and pushing.
And that was stronger than maybe, I'm sure, in the back of your minds, you might be thinking, like you mentioned earlier, like your family would grieve.
Yes.
That they would be.
Yeah.
That wasn't penetrating your brain at the moment.
Right, exactly. I mean, it was just a strong compulsion just to do it and get it over with, because this is the only way that it's going to work. And it was loud. It was my own voice, but it was just drug and alcohol fueled, you know, and it was just complete obsession. Just go and just do it because this is what you have to do. I didn't have time to even think or play it out in any kind of way, or what can I do, because I thought I had did everything, and I just felt useless.
So what would you say to someone who may be experiencing those feelings that you were experiencing before your attempt? What would you say to them if you had the opportunity? And I guess in your current positions, you probably do.
Yes. That, you know, there's hope. Never give up hope. And that you're worthy, you know, you're important, you know, you're loved and you're special, you're unique. There's nobody else like you here, you know. And just reach out with some support and some empathy and compassion for what they're going through, and try to help them. Because for me, it was just a tangled web of things. It was things.
Right.
And there were things that could be fixed had I shared these things with some people. There were resources, there were churches, there were things that could have been done. I couldn't hear and I didn't understand. So when I'm talking to, or I'm trying to support someone, I try to make sure that they know, hey, I can help. There are things in places, there are resources. You know, there's a way out of this.
And you can get past it.
And you can get through it. Yes, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'd tell someone that you're worth living, that you know, it's not hopeless, even when it feels hopeless, and that there is a way forward. And that there are people out there who care and can help in that moment, that, you know, your life isn't over, even though it feels like that's the only path. And I know we get to do that as peer recovery specialists, where people are, you know, feeling very hopeless and like there's no way forward. And part of what we can do is use our lived experience that, yeah, we've been in a similar
Yes.
place, and here we are on the other side. You know, and it's not like I don't have depression anymore. But it's way more manageable. I have way more wellness tools and supports, and that those things are out there
And
for
I think
people.
that's why it's so important, and we talked about stigma, it's so important to talk about it and to be open about it, because,
Yes.
you know, if you know, I would tell somebody about my bad knee, and I do, but, you know, but mental illness should not be taboo. It shouldn't be thought of as this thing people can't talk about it, because if you did have an issue with your knee, you would go to a doctor.
Yeah.
You would seek help.
Yes.
And I think I also wanted to note that both of you, along with Christine, another peer support specialist, we have a show, or you have a show, I should say, called Recovery Life, and
Yes.
you talk about your lived experience and how important it is for people to seek the help that's out there. And I know that the city has recently put up the 988 signs around the city, which is just a number to dial if you are in crisis.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different resources at Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care, and of course peer support is one part of that.
Right.
So I thank you both for joining me today. It's not an easy subject to talk about, and I know me asking you to talk about your specific, you know, suicide attempt experience has not been easy, I'm sure, but I think it's so valuable. I truly do, and I think
If it helps someone, it's worth it.
absolutely. So
And that's
I
what's important.
definitely
Helping somebody, saving a life.
and just knowing that someone's not alone. They're not the
Right.
only person who may be feeling this,
Yeah.
and that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
It is.
Definitely.
It's just a matter of reaching out. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, both. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having
Pleasure.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this special series of a closer look at suicide prevention. The conversations we've had here are just the beginning. One important thing we have learned is that reaching out can save lives, whether you're seeking help for yourself or offering support to someone else. Thank you for being a part of this important journey. Let's continue to spread awareness, compassion, and hope.